Lord be with you, and a warm welcome to you as always from all of us here at Powerscourt with Kilbride. I'm beneath our beloved chestnut tree, and I have to tell you, after a week of glorious sunshine and a bank holiday weekend of glorious sunshine, we are a little bit under cloud here at the top of the hill in Powerscourt and down the hill in Kilbride. But you're welcome to join us now for the next 10 or 15 minutes as we come together in this small square to recognise the constant presence of God in our lives in prayer and to hear His holy word today. The scriptures, all three of them, in all of our churches today are about faith. And in the case of our first reading that you will hear in our churches, we see Abraham's blind faith. The second reading from the letter to the Romans reminds us to hold fast to the faith that was first given to us as an inspiration by Abraham. And of course, in the gospel today, Merciful Hour, Jesus has a very busy day. He not only calls Matthew the tax collector, but while sitting at a meal is approached by one of the heads of the synagogue whose daughter has died. And then he manages to heal a lady who has been hemorrhaging for 12 years. So you can imagine it's full on in our gospel reading today. You are welcome to join us now, and we pause for a moment, as always, in prayer.
Gospel reading for today is from Matthew chapter 9, verses 9 to 13 and 18 to 26. As Jesus was walking along, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he got up and followed him. And as he sat at dinner in the house, many tax collectors and sinners came and were sitting with him and his disciples. When the Pharisees saw this, they said to his disciples, "Why does your teacher eat with tax collectors and sinners?" On hearing this, Jesus said, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. Go and learn what this means. I desire mercy, not sacrifice. For I have come to call not the righteous, but sinners." While he was saying these things to them, suddenly a leader of the synagogue came in and knelt before him, saying, "My daughter has just died, but come and lay your hand on her, and she will live." And Jesus got up and followed him with his disciples. Then suddenly a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak. For she said to herself, "If I only touch his cloak, I will be made well." Jesus turned, and seeing her, he said, "Take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well." And instantly the woman was made well. When Jesus came to the leader's house and saw the flute players and the crowd making a commotion, he said, "Go away, for the girl is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. But when the crowd had been put outside, he went in and took her by the hand, and the girl got up. And the report of this spread throughout that district. This is the word of the Lord.
As I mentioned, today is all about faith, but not necessarily the type of faith that feels glorious and comfortable and secure. Possibly the type of faith that feels anything but secure. The type of blind faith that Abraham had at the age of 75 when he pulled up tent pegs and gathered together his kit and kin, his livestock, and he moved. He moved because he had felt the voice of God in his life, or heard the voice of God in his life, calling him forward from the life that he had known into new ground, into something completely new. And he wasn't too old to say no or to ignore that calling in his life. In the letter to the Romans in our churches, St. Paul reminds us that grace can only be allowed in when based on that kernel of faith that we hold within ourselves. And sometimes having that faith is literally putting one foot in front of the other at a time in our lives when we have nothing left, and we just trust in something more, in that divine power that will carry us through and will guide us forward. That's the type of faith we're talking about today. In the Gospel, Matthew, the tax collector, who would have had quite a comfortable life financially, but a miserable life socially because of the job that he did, takes a leap of faith and follows the Christ out of one life and into another, if you understand where we're going this morning with the underlying theme. It's all about having the nerve to be open to, number one, hear the voice of God, and number two, to follow that voice as it brings you into new ground that may not necessarily at the outset feel comfortable for you. Jesus is criticized for sitting with tax collectors and sinners, but reminds everybody that it's the reason he came, that he didn't come to heal those who were already well, but those who were in most need of him. And while he is there, falling to his knees, comes one of the leaders of the synagogue. Now, this is a huge event, if you can imagine this. And he asks Jesus to come and to lay his hand on his daughter who has died. Now, within the Jewish faith, there are two things that will make a person unclean. The first is to touch somebody who is dead. And we think of the Good Samaritan story when we think of this, and the priest walking past on the other side of the road, not touching the man for fear possibly that he was dead, because they were on their way to pray. So to touch somebody who is dead is to render you unclean for a time. And for somebody to be having an issue of blood, a hemorrhaging woman, for Jesus to touch her or for her to touch him is to make him unclean. So getting back to the leader of the synagogue knew that asking Jesus this would render him unclean. And Jesus was getting up to go and was making his way to do just that, when another leap of faith occurred. A lady who had been hemorrhaging for 12 years or more, who had absolutely tried everything in her life and had been left with nothing, decided to take that leap of faith. And she thought, if I can only just touch the fringe of his cloak, of his garment, I will be healed. That's the type of faith we're talking about today. And it doesn't matter, Jesus doesn't mind if desperation is driving that faith, as long as the faith is there. And so, on his way to raise the synagogue leader's daughter from the dead, he is touched by a lady and her faith heals her. But what I wanted to leave with you today is not only the idea of this powerful faith that is required of us, the comfort that we can take from not feeling happy in that faith. It's not meant to necessarily feel good all the time. I didn't want to just leave you with that, but to talk to you about the garment that Jesus wore. The cloak, if you like, that he wore, and the fringe that the lady touched. In Numbers in the Old Testament, it is advised that people wear a fringe to their garment, and the fringe could be entwined with blue thread, woven with blue thread in it, to remind the person of the right way to live, of the commandments of God. And isn't it incredible that the lady touches this reminder on Jesus? This one part of what he wears that reminds everybody about God. So you have a lot going on today in the gospel reading. You have the uncleanliness, the boundaries that Jesus passes over in order to be with the people who need him the most. He sets aside the law and all the practicing beliefs, and he steps over them, is quite willing to do so, to get to the people who need him the most. And I'm here to tell you that he hasn't changed one little jot today. He will still do the same thing for you if you are in need today, but you need to trust him with 110%. You need to take a leap of faith, to reach for the fringe of his garment and to touch it in the knowledge that he will give to you a fullness of life in whatever need that you might have this day. Jesus' garment is interwoven with different threads, threads of kindness, threads of compassion, threads of peace and patience, threads of love. And they are strengthened in their number by courage, the interwoven courage and resilience of the Christ, because he bases his heart on love. And there is only love as the strongest source in anything. And that's the place from which he operates.